Hello and welcome. I'm Adriana Farmiga, an artist and the Associate Dean of the School of Art here at the Cooper Union. I want to thank you all for joining us. We are thrilled to be hosting this event and continuing our series of public art fund talks at the Cooper Union, albeit online. Although we can't currently gather in person on campus, we're so glad to continue our shared work in presenting important conversations to a broad public about the power of creative expression. The topic of tonight's conversation, Art in the Time of Crisis, is especially poignant as we meet online and are reminded of the extraordinary challenges that our city and the entire world has seen in just a few months since the pandemic began. Tonight's dialogue, the first of two, so stay tuned for details about our second program, centers around Public Art Fund's Art on the Grid, an exhibition for which I served on the nominating committee. It was an honor to be part of this exhibition and to suggest some of the emerging voices in New York City who could respond and help process this extraordinary time through their work. My thanks to Public Art Fund for including me, partnering with the Cooper Union, and making this event possible. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Katarina Stathapulu, who is an assistant curator at Public Art Fund. She's one of the curators of Art on the Grid, currently on view at 500 plus locations citywide. Her most recent exhibitions include Far El Qasimi, Back and Forth Disco, and El Perez, From Sun to Sun. Please join me in welcoming Katarina Stathapulu.
Thank you, Adriana, for the kind introduction. As she mentioned, we had the pleasure of working with her on Art on the Grid, as she was one of the nominators who submitted artists' names for consideration for the exhibition. As Adriana mentioned, I'm one of the curators of Public Art Fund's exhibition Art on the Grid that I co-curated with Director and Chief Curator Nicholas Bohm and Curator Daniel S. Palmer, I should say, from Public Art Fund. So we're very happy to have three of the artists of the exhibition with us today, Arielle Bobb-Wilis, Nate Lewis, and Sharon Madanes, joining me in conversation to discuss the themes of healing and recovery through the lens of their newly commissioned works in Art on the Grid. Before we begin, I want to take the opportunity to thank the donors who generously support our public programs, including Con Edison, the New York State Council on the Arts, and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. We're grateful for their ongoing support that allows us to do this public program for free. I also want to thank the many donors that helped make Art on the Grid possible. In particular, I want to thank the exhibition's supporters who are joining us today, including Bloomberg Philanthropies, the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation, and the members of Public Art Fund's board, including Patty and Howard Silverstein. And of course, our partners, JCDecaux and NYC&Co, who made this exhibition possible by providing over 500 ad spaces for us to display the works in Art on the Grid. So a few words about the exhibition. This past spring, Public Art Fund invited 50 emerging New York-based artists to participate in this citywide exhibition by reflecting on the COVID-19 pandemic and the parallel epidemic of systemic racism as a way to really help our communities process these crises. In order to broaden our reach and assemble a group of 50 outstanding emerging artists who reflect the multiplicity of New York, we invited 32 colleagues, including Adriana, including artists, curators, academics, to nominate artists for consideration. Together with Public Art Fund's curatorial team's own recommendations, we considered over 200 artists and narrowed down this selection to the 50 artists that we invited to participate. We asked the artists to respond to the broad themes of reconnection and renewal, interpreted through their different experiences and perspectives. Nicholas, Daniel, and myself were truly overwhelmed with the powerful and heartfelt artwork responses we received. The resulting artworks included reflections on a number of themes, among them loss, healing, and rebuilding, and the revelation of the hurdles we face as we care for the physical and mental well-being of ourselves and our communities. The goal of this exhibition was really to provide a public platform to artists to make responsive works of art in a moment of crisis, and hopefully enable the people of New York to engage with the city in new ways. The exhibition features 50 artists from 18 countries who live in the 5 boroughs of New York and New Jersey. Collectively, the 50 artists in Art on the Grid form a decentralized group exhibition on the city's public transportation and communication infrastructure. These works are housed on 500 JC2Co bus shelters and on over 1,700 Link NYC kiosks that are located throughout the 5 boroughs. The works, in a way, re-envision the city itself as an outdoor gallery, reminding us that even in times of adversity, artistic expression is indispensable. I'd like here to show a minute-long video about Art on the Grid that will help set the tone for individuals who haven't been able to see the works in public yet. So Kim, it would be great to play the video here.
When we went into lockdown, every cultural venue that we know and love as New Yorkers was having to shut down. It very quickly became clear to us that Public Art Fund had a special responsibility. Art on the Grid is an exhibition of the work of 50 emerging New York City-based artists presented all over New York City on JC2Co bus shelters and Link NYC digital kiosks. We invited artists to reflect on their experience of life during the pandemic and the regional, national, and international response to systemic racism, to inequality, to demanding change. And they've responded to that challenge in extraordinary ways. We knew that we needed a cultural interpretation of this extraordinarily painful and difficult moment, and hopefully renewed optimism as we started to go back to our public spaces.
We can move on to introducing the artists. Needless to say, we were thrilled when Arielle, Sharon, and Nate accepted our invitation to participate in this exhibition. The works they created are invaluable contributions to Art on the Grid. Each of the 3 artists approached the project with thoughtfulness and ingenuity and created truly personal and intensely inspiring works. So without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Arielle Bobb-Willis.
Hi, thank you, Katerina. So I guess I should start by just talking about what my work centers around. I have depression and anxiety, which a lot of people struggle with on the daily, and you can definitely feel that tension within my work between. I think it's wanting to always be better and always, you know, trying to be better, trying to be healthy, trying self-care, trying, you know, all these things, but also recognizing your past and recognizing, you know, that depression is something that you have to deal with and work on always. I think, is this like the first slide, or is it, I don't know. Is that the first slide? I don't know if I can really see, but yeah. So I guess it's easier when I like see my work and I can talk about it. But yeah, so I kind of just wanted to show you guys a little bit of kind of like how my work looks as a whole in this first slide. I use a lot of you know, paint and clothing and cardboard and construction paper and just things that I find in like 99-cent stores or like thrifting or something like that. So because I think when you're starting out as an artist, you have $20, and you need to figure out how you're gonna create. If you want to create, nothing is gonna stop you from doing that. And I kind of just used what I had. This slide, I wanted to kind of showcase just what I'm inspired by, and I'm inspired by Black painters of the past and present. As you can see, there's Sister Gertrude Morgan. I'm inspired by Max Ernst, surrealists like Max Ernst, artists today like Dana Robinson, but I'm also inspired by the day-to-day, pictures that I take at like fruit stands or, just greenery, and I'm always looking around where I'm, the city, the streets, because I like shooting outside. I like the sun. It's just me, the sun, and the subject, so I'm also inspired. When I was first starting photography, I have 3 siblings under the age of like they're very little, and I'm kind of grew into photography while they were still very small. So I'm definitely inspired by children, and just how egoless they are, and how when people come into my shoots, it's kind of like your ego goes away and you're kind of stepping into something that you wouldn't normally do on the day-to-day, which is kind of trying to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, which definitely is something that when you do have depression, you have to kind of move into a little bit. And yeah, this slide I wanted to show, this is the first picture on the left that I ever took in this kind of way. And then on the right is kind of, I started doing, fashion and, how my work has evolved, and just trying to see how my work can fit in different types of photography. Yeah, I think you can go to the next slide if you want. And this is kind of where I'm at now, just trying to figure out how to, again, to use my work to just broaden my mind and keep growing. I think I could have just stayed and just done art and done, but I'm excited to learn how to work with a set, like on set with teams. I did the Times and Burberry and celebrity stuff, and it's interesting to just keep evolving, and always remaining a student is super important to me. And I guess that's like 5 minutes? 5 minutes of like, I tried to do it fast.
No, it's great. It would be great, Ariel, if you spoke a little bit about your work in Art on the Grid as well.
Yeah, so when I was going into the project, I was like, how do I feel? What's going on? And I really wanted to, I guess I was feeling, again, I think I've always talked about photography, how it's therapeutic for me. It saved a lot of, it saved me, or it's something, a place that I can go that's positive, and it's healing, but I never want it to come off as that, that's the end of my healing. Like, oh, I found photography and now I'm like perfectly better. I'm 100%. So I wanted to kind of showcase what the feeling of just continuous healing and the cycle of healing, and how it's just like something you kind of come back to the lessons you've learned over and over. But you're a better person and you grow, and it's kind of this upward spiral where you're getting better, but you're kind of it's a cycle of healing. And that's where I was at, and I decided to kind of showcase that with the arms. If you trace it, it's kind of a never-ending triangle of like a never-ending kind of yeah, it's weird explaining, like I never like explain exactly what's like, oh, I use this color because but for this I really it was nice to like have a specific theme and really go for that fully, and that was interesting too. So yeah, it was improvising, but not as much as I do usually, so it was fun.
Thank you so much, Ariel. I definitely have follow-up questions, but we can move on to Sharon Madanes, and then at the end we can come back and have a conversation about all 3 of your works in the show.
Cool.
Hi, everybody. So about, you can go to the first slide. About 6 years ago, I started medical school, and that changed my art practice significantly, spending days in healthcare settings. So my studio really became an arena for me to reflect on my experiences in the hospital and all aspects of medical culture, from the very mundane, such as hand washing, which is the painting in front of you is based on, to more complicated dynamics. So this is a painting that I made at the very start of medical school. And it's one of many paintings about hand washing. I call them my hand hygiene paintings, that I continue to make now, sort of mimicking, the repetitiveness of the gesture, especially in healthcare settings. Obviously now during the pandemic, the meaning of these paintings has shifted and has a completely different emotional valence. But this is really just an example of one of the things I've been making work about. You can go to the next slide. This is a painting called Clinical Vision, and it's just for reference, it's about 7.5 feet by 10 feet. So it's very large. And for me, this painting was really about balancing different ways of seeing, specifically in medical settings. You're trained to look at things in a very clinical way, which is often based on comparing systematically what's in front of you with a studied idea of what you consider normal, and sort of balancing this with a way of looking that I was trained to do in art school, and the kind of looking that I do when I look at paintings, for example, which for me is just more expansive, more playful, and you're holding sort of, as opposed to a catalog of normal images, you're holding a catalog of like art history or like different visual language in front of you. And so this is a painting that I made, based on the experience of reading a CAT scan during morning rounds, looking for pathology, but then also sort of getting entranced in painterly forms as you scroll through different cross sections. You can go to the next slide. This is a painting called 39 Hazards, and it's about 80 by 64. In healthcare settings, I think waiting is really essential action, specifically when it comes to health and recovery. And the kind of waiting that happens in these settings is not really a means to an end, but really the main attraction, the central action that's happening. So in this painting, I was trying to capture the particular energy that accompanies this state, which for me feels incredibly slow, but then also very chaotic and anxiety provoking at the same time. You can go to the next slide. So this is the painting that I made for Art on the Grid. At the start of the pandemic, I was actually working on the medicine floor nights. For a number of reasons, I was quickly transitioned to telemedicine and to virtual work. But I continued to be consumed by both my experiences those first few weeks, and then also the harrowing stories from patients and colleagues about their experiences, because I continue to work in healthcare settings right now. And something that continued to reverberate in my mind was how to overcome challenges of receiving comfort and also comforting others without seeing someone's face or being able to be close to somebody else through layers of protective gowns. And I kept thinking about like moments of personal connection that happen in the routines of the hospital, such as taking vital signs, which this is a painting about. It's called Pulse. And how these moments become even more poignant because they're moments of physical touch that feel increasingly rare right now. I think that we all have a desire for closeness, particularly when we're sick. And all of these physical barriers, such as gowns, gloves, everything that now we're required to wear to keep ourselves safe can really heighten this longing. So these are some of the things that I was thinking about as I made the work, and I hope it comes across.
Thank you so much, Sharon. We will move on to Nate.
Hello, my name is Nate Lewis. You can go to the first slide, that's cool. So I didn't start my art practice until the first time I ever drew was in 2010. And it was actually while I was working as an intensive care unit registered nurse. It was within my first year of working as a nurse that I started drawing. And I guess by way of what I was surrounded by, my practice quickly became informed by my experience working in the ICU and all the many multi-dimensional ways that it can. First, my practice started through sculpting paper, and through sculpting paper, it's like I created anatomy, like a new anatomy within the paper. After that, to tell more of a narrative, I started working with figures. First, I did like self-portraits, and then I started working with Black figures. You can go to the next slide. And while I was working self-portraits, while I was working with figures, I didn't know exactly what it was, why I interrupted imagery. And it wasn't until I started working with these ideas, working with like these are images I took. This is an image at the inauguration that I took. It wasn't until I started working with these images that I understood that the way that I interrupt imagery, the reason why I was influenced by the many different diagnostic lenses that we would use to see the unseen within our patients. The lenses, MRI, CT scans, X-rays, they're endless, they're numerous. And it's one of the most important tools to understand the unseen, to find balance. The interesting thing about the lenses is that it's a completely new language that you have to learn. And it's a language of colors, shapes, shades of black, shades of grays, but they use color in a way to just bring, let the densities and the different material matter within a body come to surface. So it's a new language one has to learn. So I started using that with figures, and then I started using it with, you can go to the next slide. I started using it with imagery that's kind of like popular imagery that's kind of like in the zeitgeist, politically based imagery that's people have different thoughts regarding. So it's like it was applying a new language to these historically based ideas and subjects. And for me personally, I think a lot of history, and definitely in the United States, the history here, we're taught to learn it in a certain language, and it needs to be that language of seeing and understanding. For me, I realized it needed to be something new. So applying this language of diagnostic imagery is my way of kind of like teaching one to reassess how you see an idea, because it's a completely foreign language, not really sure what it means, but it's interesting, and it's aesthetically pleasing, so it could draw one in. So the work I do, I sculpt into all of the paper. It's all a single sheet of paper. I sculpt into it, pull out a lot of different textures and elements, and it ends up looking like textures and layers, but it's just a single sheet of paper. I started working with ink as well. So the art on the grid piece that I did, it was really intense when the pandemic hit, and I was actually considering going back to work as a intensive care nurse for this time. I was just like really drawn and feeling like camaraderie, like all my people are out there, like I need to be out there. My father, who is also in healthcare, he's a nurse anesthetist, he ended up talking me out of it. But I was really invested in knowing everything about this time, knowing everything medically about it, but more than anything, really seeing how this landscape of COVID really revealed truths about this country particularly, and the world as well. And so the piece I made is using something which is the lungs, which all of us are, fragile and certain at a certain spectrum. Not only, physically, the health, but also lives, economy, everything. And in the United States, all of the all of the different talks, the different narratives that have been said, regarding an idea, with science. I decided to use the lungs and apply the same language that I apply to everything, to try to just build a bridge for a conversation. And I think healing and recovery for me, the only way that I feel healed, like myself as an artist, my conviction, obviously taking care of patients and understanding them in those ways is just a healing thing. But in terms of moving my art practice, I like bringing those ideas to bringing that conviction and that idea of approaching a subject matter into healing. So it's trying to find a bridge to build between just opposite opinions and ideas regarding things, so that we can have productive conversations and progress and understanding, where each one sits regarding things.
Thank you so much, Nate. Thank you for the insight into your practice and into your work for Art on the Grid specifically.
Yes.
I would like to now open it up to all three artists and ask some questions and hopefully start a conversation before answering some of the audience questions. A connecting thread among the artwork that all three of you have created for Art on the Grid is the focus on health, as well as physical and mental well-being. I guess I'm curious why you decided to create this specific work for this specific show. And this question is for all three of you, so feel free to, whoever wants can answer this.
Cool. Yeah, I decided to choose the specific piece I chose because I wanted to speak to the global pandemic, and also wanted to speak to the uprising. And for me, using the lungs, it just ended up being like it really hit both of the ideas in a very direct way. But like with my work, like my goal is to really find a place in which I'm just like presenting an idea for you to consider and to think about, and not necessarily tell you what to think about it. I want it to be thoughtful, and I wanted to just build conversation, really. So that's why I chose to do that particular piece.
I think something very interesting, and I should have mentioned in the introductory remarks, is that when we launched the exhibition in 2 phases. Sharon and Arielle were in the first phase, and Nate was in the second phase. And in the interim, before we had the chance to invite the second group of artists to participate, the killing of George Floyd took place, which obviously shifted everything and adjusted our thinking and adjusted the premise of this exhibition. So Nate, in conversations I had with you, I thought it was very interesting how with this work, you basically responded to both pandemics and epidemics that we're discussing. One is COVID-19, and the second one is the killing of George Floyd. And I remember you telling me how the lungs also, in a way, stand in for George Floyd's last words, "I can't breathe." Would you like to speak a bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the lungs, the lungs were a catalyst, for something that happened. But I guess, if I think about the lungs and like George Floyd in terms of the uprising, that was just like, an individual catalyst for obviously a history and a numerous systemic ideas, regarding the subject matter. I mean, for one, it's interesting thinking about the lungs and thinking about like systemic racism and, especially, a lot of Black neighborhoods. There's a lot higher asthma rates than anywhere, in terms of neighborhoods, in terms of demographic, geographic areas. So then it's like, so I think about that, but then you think about that relationship between those lungs, between George Floyd, and between a higher amount of African American and Latino people who are less resilient, who are more fragile for the same reasons that George Floyd ended up being killed, and with all that, how everything's all tied up. So it's just yeah, like a lot within in that simple symbol.
Mhm. Would anybody else like to respond to the question why you decided to create this specific work for Art on the Grid? Or we could, yeah, go ahead.
I I think I wanted to again just speak on the fact that, I mean, I guess there's always going to be something that comes up that you have to again heal from, and I wanted to kind of talk about how you can be healed and still be healing. I think it's okay, and that it's not just one or the other. Like, you should be completely all the way amazing, great, perfect, happy, or you should be like on the other side. Like, there's this middle ground that I think we all kind of sit in sometimes, where we're trying to move forward with something. And especially during this year, I think we're all trying to kind of continuously move forward and like continue to like be, have some sense of reality that once was but isn't. And it's this like weird middle ground that I think everyone was in and still is, and that's how I was feeling, at least. And I think a lot of people were definitely feeling that as well. And that, it's that you have to, remain resilient, and you have the right to continue to like fight for your happiness. And that's what I mean when you can be healed and still be healing from something. And I think, again, we had the pandemic, but then we have two pandemics now, like, I mean, we've always had the pandemic of racism, systemic racism, everything like that. And it's something that I think was brought into light in a unfortunate way. But I feel, it's again something that, at least for me, it brought on another like wave of stress. So again, there's always going to be multiple things, a lot of things coming at you, but I kind of tell myself, just continue to fight, for some sense of clarity through it all, which is hard, but that's what I tell myself. I don't know about you guys, how you guys felt, but like there's just one thing after the other like this year, like it's just like a lot. So yeah, that's why I created what I did. Yeah.
Thank you. Sharon, did you want to add something?
Yeah. I think I talked a little bit about this during my presentation, but I just kept thinking about ways of establishing closeness and how people connect with one another, like despite all these layers and barriers that separate people from each other. And I mean, particularly, protective equipment is intended to be a barrier and intended to separate you from other people. So how do you overcome that barrier? And like despite that, and that for me was what the painting was about. And then also, just other things that I was thinking about. I kept looking at paintings of like the Bubonic Plague. For some reason, at the start of the pandemic, I decided to see what other artists were doing during moments like this. And something that struck me about those images was how prominent the fabric is, all the folds, and how it sort of like consumes the image. And I sort of felt like that is what was happening right now. Like everybody was sort of consumed by, especially in the hospital, like all these gowns and all the fabrics everywhere. It felt sort of consuming. And then also, in the painting, I didn't have any faces, but I wanted there to be some sort of intimacy despite the lack of facial expression.
Thank you for that. I have another question for all of you or any of you. Did the fact that you were creating the work for a public setting, knowing that it would be displayed in public, affect the work that you created?
Yeah.
Oh
no, go ahead, Ariel. Go ahead.
I was gonna say no. I don't know. I didn't really think about it. No, I don't know. No. That's it. That's my answer. Yeah, no.
Nate?
Yeah, mine did, for sure. As we had a conversation over it, I ended up I had a couple different ideas, and I was going back and forth, and shortly, I mean, it came to me to use imagery that was accessible to anybody and everybody, that they didn't have to think about, from children to older people to, people who've never seen art in their lives. So I chose to just use something that was immediately accessible without really having to think too much about it.
Yeah, I didn't, I don't like to think too hard. It was more just about like, how I was feeling, I guess. And hopefully that would be displayed in a way that people can take whatever they want from it. I didn't want to like put any direct things in it, I guess. But yeah, just take it for what it is, whatever you feel, that's fine, So that's kind of where my mind was, definitely. Yeah. But I understand both ways. Yeah.
Sharon?
Yeah, I kept thinking about just the simplicity necessary for like a public art setting. And thinking about like having one idea and having that one idea just really be central to the image and very accessible. And then also, I love, as you can probably tell from my paintings, I love color. So I wanted also there to be something joyful in it, despite, the sort of morbid subject matter.
Interesting, very interesting. Aspects of the pandemic that I think many of us have been consumed with are, how do we come out of it? What does the process look like? And what are the scars that the pandemic will leave? What are the scars that will mark our future? And so I guess I'm wondering how you're hoping that your work will be perceived by public audiences, and maybe what thoughts or emotions you would like to evoke from the viewers.
Just some feeling, just a feeling, like some feeling. Yeah, again, I don't want to like throw too much at them. If they feel something, then that's if they hate it, they hate it. If they think it's weird and boring, that's whatever. If they love it, if they yeah, just some sort of feeling would be great. But yeah, I guess that's where I'm.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I think I mean, I did my piece like really hoping that people realize the responsibility that they have, and that it's like a very individual basis choice responsibility, and that what they do will determine what will happen, not only in this country but in the entire world. And I think that's what I feel like there's a disconnect with that, like in terms of like just reading about so many different countries, everything going on, and how everybody is equipped or not equipped, and thinking about like whatever I'm doing here in New York City can affect a village in Peru who doesn't have access to oxygen, and that's what I wanted to put out there, that individual responsibility in terms of the pandemic and in terms of the revolution. I think just care and love, just care and love, and that that there's the ability to be able to put something like this in a public place will make people think about that more, and thinking about caring for people who maybe they haven't cared about as much in the past.
Yeah, I think I similarly was hoping for this sense of connection, like despite the fact that everybody's grieving, and that this is like a very challenging, unprecedented time, and how do people come together during this period of time with all the anonymity, without being able to show your face in many scenarios. And so I guess also like Arielle, any feeling is a feeling, and it means that someone is looking and responding. And I don't know what the view. This is obviously based on my experiences, and so I welcome anyone else's interpretations.
Yeah, definitely. Just keep it open, like, open to hear what. It's nice hearing what people feel, because it's, once I put like if I put like too much of a meaning, I feel like it maybe dictates like how other people might have wanted to feel about it, maybe. So it's nice to hear what people think about my work when I'm like, what? Like, I didn't. That's interesting, but it's fun. It's cool. But yeah, no, I agree.
Thank you for that, Ariel. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I want to open it up to some of the questions from the audience, because we're getting some great ones. So I have a question here for all participants. It says, as an artist, do you find the landscape of the pandemic a creative space? And how has it changed your practice?
I mean, for me, I'm a photographer, so it's definitely harder to, and I'm also a germaphobe. Like, I'm like, so I obviously shooting and everything has gone down. There's not really that much happening, but I think it's a really great time for me to like move inward and to kind of focus on things that I might have been pushing aside because you're distracted by the world and the hum of it all, and but I think I've just been kind of taking that time, which I'm really just grateful to have, just like so grateful to have time to sit quiet and just think about how I'm feeling, which is a nice place to be. Obviously definitely panicked in the beginning. I think everyone did, but now I'm kind of at the place where I can just be a little bit more calm and go inward. But yeah, not too many shoots happening. Nothing really going on, but it's fun. It's fun. I did a Zoom shoot, which was fun, but yeah, it's all different.
Yeah, I mean, it's been in terms of clarity, in terms of time and space, and being able to like not being in the rat race in terms of making work. It's been really good. I dove into like within the first, like when things started happening, I started working with a medium, like learned a sound program and started working with sound, something I've been wanting to do for so long but haven't done. And yeah, for me, it was just kind of thinking about going into this new landscape we're living in, and I wanted to be able to take it in and be able to express it through a different medium, just to stretch myself and really just do things I've always wanted to do. Understanding so many different mediums that speak to different people in different ways. And then yeah, it's just been really, I'm able to take my time on my work and I don't have to rush, and it's just it's been really awesome, and I can be really thoughtful um and making work in a way I never haven't, because it's always been a rush. A lot of exhibitions were canceled and everything, so I'm grateful that it's been an advantage to me.
For me, the pandemic has sort of shifted everything in terms of my work, like as a resident physician, and then also my studio practice. I feel like I live a completely virtual existence right now. And so much of what I usually make work about is about being places physically. And now like the domestic sphere is completely enmeshed with my work sphere, as is the case for I think everybody right now. And it's just shifted so many things. And also like I now physically work in a small space. And so I'm making much smaller works, which is a whole different constraint. But I think it's nice to have some boundaries and some limitations. I think that forces you to be creative.
That's the whole fun of it. Like when I do shoots, like it's so fun. Like, oh, we don't have this. Like, you know, it's kind of fun. Also, I wish I could paint. Like, I'm so jealous. Like, I wish I could paint. Like, if I were a painter, like my photos are what I would paint. I try, and it's just, it's not for me.
We can swap. I'll take photography.
Let's just like swap for a day, you know. But like, I think I'm just not patient. Maybe like you have to really like sit and like go over. I don't know, but yeah, photography is pretty, you know. But no, your guys' work is so incredible. Like I was looking at it, I'm like, wow. Sorry, just like yeah, it's great.
Another question. Another question for all three of you is how has it been seeing your work throughout New York City? Have you been surprised to see your work become part of the landscape of the city?
I've always wanted that to be a thing, definitely. I've always dreamed of that happening. So it's like kind of incredible for me. But yeah, it's like really fun. It's just fun. It's fun and like, and I don't know, it's great. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, yeah, it was, I mean, the first time I saw my piece, I was super excited. I didn't think I was going to be that excited, but I was like really excited.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, it's encouraging, you know, it's encouraging, you know, to know that, you know, whatever group of people picked you for a certain time, you know, and that something that you're doing resonates with, you know, a broader public, you know.
Yeah, the first time I saw the piece, I actually wasn't looking for it. I was just walking to the hospital and I ran into it on a bus stop and I did like a double take.
That's the best. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And it was really exciting.
Wow.
That's great. Sharon, I have a question addressed to you, which is, how would you say that being an artist has informed your approach to medicine?
I think it completely has, I mean, in every way it's informed my approach. I've always been an artist, first and foremost. I think, you know, I sort of talked about this a tiny bit with the painting, Clinical Vision, which is about ways of looking and seeing. And I think Nate also spoke to this in his presentation. But I think being trained in art and also coming from a humanities background, the way that you engage with people and the way that you view people isn't like sort of one-minded. And so I feel like I've really been able to draw on my art background to both look like in terms of like visual observation in a more creative way, but then also just to think about medical problems, you know, in more creative ways, which I think medicine is an art. And I think having that background is really helpful.
They go hand in hand, definitely.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a doctor. I did when I was younger. And then my parents, I got a camera. I'm like, nope, just kidding. They're like, what? Like, what? You want to be a what? Yeah.
That's interesting. To add to what Sharon said, I'm much more sensitive to everything now, because like when I first started working as an artist, I just started working in the ICU. I'd be too interested in everything way too much to work in the ICU right now. I would just be enamored by everything. I'd want to be able to read X-rays and diagnostic imagery like the radiologists. I would just be a student, and I feel like I'd be too distracted by like everything, because I'm so, you know, it's like I want to know how everything works now, you know. It's interesting.
That's really interesting. Arielle, when you and I first spoke about your participation in the project, you pointed out that you didn't have access to the models and the subject matters that you usually work with, which I hadn't even thought of when we first started talking about the project. So you ended up photographing someone close to you. Is that something that you've done before? How is that working with someone that you're close with, as opposed to a model that you might not have such a personal connection with?
It's funny. It's just funny. It's the person in the photo. I've photographed with him before, but I think maybe, I guess it's just more comfortable. I think I'm not as like nervous. I think before shoots, I'm rightfully so very like nervous and anxious, and it was kind of a lot more chill and like, oh, let's just like go here and there because they know me so well. And like, it was very I mean, it's nicer, but I usually don't use like just models, like people who know how to like move and that's their job. I usually use people I find on the internet, friends of friends of friends, you know, things like that. And again, it's nice to like work with people who aren't, you know, trained in that way, because it kind of makes it a little bit more awkward, and again gets people out of their comfort zone. So he was out of his comfort zone a little bit, but I was kind of, you know, it wasn't as like maybe it wasn't as like uncomfortable maybe as or like as anxiety driven as I feel like when I'm shooting otherwise. But yeah, it was a good time.
It's almost 6 p.m. So I'm going to read one last question to all three of you from the audience, which is, have you gotten any direct feedback from viewers and from the public about your works in Art on the Grid?
Oh, no. No, I haven't, but like people have said they like the photo, like that I know and everything, but I haven't gotten any feedback.
Yeah, I've had a few people, they're asking me, they're like, is the original of the piece available? And there's a couple people, you know, it really meant a lot to me, you know, that they really understood, you know, the weight that was you know, the density of the piece for me, and like that, you know, it included so many things from thinking about like, you know, science, and how we're wrestling with science being true, being not true, with just the pandemic being a complete hoax, just everything. Like, it's like everything, you know, was really put in that piece. And there's a lot of people that really, really loved how you know, how I struck that using that symbol, and letting it just be like just a symbol of the time. Really, they were really loved it in that way. That's really encouraging. Yeah.
I haven't heard anything directly from like viewers on the street, but people that I do know personally have reached out, which is always rewarding.
That's great. Well, we've enjoyed seeing the works throughout the city. It's one of the largest, most ambitious exhibitions Public Art Fund has ever created. And I think I speak for Nicholas and Daniel as well as everybody else at Public Art Fund, that we put together this exhibition not only for New York, but for ourselves as well. It gave us strength to work on this project and to be able to give artists a platform and a voice in this very critical time. So thank you for being so honest and open and thoughtful and thought-provoking with the artwork you contributed, because you really are helping us as well pull through this very difficult period. And thank you so much for joining me today in conversation. As Adriana mentioned, we'll have one more talk on September 21st that will be moderated by Nicholas Bohm. It's another Art on the Grid conversation, and the title of it will be Art in the Time of Crisis, Excavating the Past, Confronting the Present, and Imagining the Future. So stay tuned for more information about the upcoming talk. And thank you so much for joining us tonight.